I broke out in shingles. And being a 20-something with shingles is very rare. It took me almost a year to get a diagnosis that I had an autoimmune disease, which was self-induced because of stress. And it was really that moment that everything came into perspective for me. No job is ever worth your health, ever. And it opened my eyes also to, why did it take so long to get a diagnosis? Why didn't these doctors understand what was happening in my body? Why do most autoimmune diseases impact women disproportionately? And why don't we understand what causes them, or really effectively how to treat them long term? And that also opened my eyes to how little I knew about my body and how little the medical establishment knew about my body.
Did you watch Apple Cider Vinegar movie on Netflix?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's on my list, but I have to watch it.
You need to watch it.
It's probably what I'm going to watch tonight on the flight.
Okay, you're gonna watch it. I want you to message me after you watch it.
I will.
But
yeah,
it was so interesting because I watched it a couple of days ago and I was like, I want to talk to Alex about this.
Yeah.
So the whole premise was this influencer who like claimed to have all these health issues,
Yes.
whatever, and made like a bank out of it,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. But, you know, the whole movie was about showcasing how the wellness industry is such a like no one really knows what it is. Like people can
It's
come out and claim these things.
Completely. It's wild.
Which I
Yeah.
agree. But then it made me think like, why are women so susceptible to like buying into all these gurus and people and products that claim all these miracles to happen? And it made me realize that the reason is because we feel so neglected by the medical field.
Absolutely. Yes.
That for us, when someone comes out, whether it's an influencer or all these products that promise the world, we're like, okay, somebody's listening, like someone wants to help us.
Yeah. But do you think it's really a female specific issue? Because I do have to wonder that maybe it's exaggerated for us because of all the societal pressure that's put on women to look and feel and behave a certain way. But at the same time, humans are automatically programmed to seek the path of least resistance. And so when we do see a quick fix, it's alluring. Oh, I don't have to spend years exercising, eating well. There's this quick fix solution. So I do think there's some of that psychology at play. Candidly, something that I find really frustrating is that more natural forms of care don't have the body of research that large pharma solutions do. So it's a little bit of both, I think, but it is a really interesting conversation.
I was diving into a little bit of the history. I've learned that in the Victorian era, whenever women would come with any health issues, it can be anything, they attributed it to
the wandering womb.
Yeah,
or
like
their uterus, or
right. It was sexual immorality, and they would say, "Oh, it's because of compulsive masturbation that you are sick."
Yes.
Okay, and that was okay. Victorian era got it. That was like a long time ago. But then less than 100 years ago, it wasn't that. It was then everything was around hysteria. So if a woman would come and complain about period cramps or any pain whatsoever, they're like, you're hysterical, go to a mental institution.
I mean, hysterical, the root word is hystera, which is literally another word for the womb, and it actually goes back as far as Hippocrates. One of my favorite books is a book called Unwell Women, which really traces how misogyny has completely shaped what we know and what we don't know about our bodies, and how they're completely enmeshed in puritanical shame to this day, and also just how women were completely omitted from most clinical research starting in the late 1970s, which is wild. Women of childbearing potential, so people like you and me, were omitted from clinical trials. And
it was in the 70s.
It was in the 70s. However, in the mid-90s, the NIH introduced a policy that would essentially say that women do need to be represented in these trials. However, as recently as 2024, women are still grossly underrepresented. And it was only in 2016 that the NIH introduced another policy called Sex as a Biological Variable, which recognized that women are not in fact small men and that our bodies function very differently. That became a requirement in terms of when you are running a study to ensure that sex is acknowledged. However, there's still a massive underrepresentation in terms of women in clinical trials and those running the trials. So, you know, it's really unfortunate. There's a lot we don't know about our bodies.
Right. So when we talk about how women specifically are the biggest consumers of all these things, it's for a reason. Like, I don't know if it's a traumatic response to decades of ignoring our needs and wants, and so I was like, I get it.
It's wild. I mean, that was ultimately such a big piece of founding this business, to be completely honest. It was like, we don't know much about our own bodies. I've been living in this body for a long time. We have been around for a long time. And how do we not know about our basic bodily functions and how to support ourselves?
So I want to hear kind of your story and how you had your wake-up call with health, because yourself and your partner and your co-founder built such a beautiful mission, but it all stems from like an event that made you realize that we need more advocacy.
Completely. Well, it all started really at the peak of my career. I had just been honored on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. I was working myself very hard. I was waking up very early, doing the high intensity workouts, rinse and repeat, working very hard, long days. I started to feel disconnected from my body, and I started experiencing a confluence of various different symptoms that were quite disruptive to my lifestyle. And so I started to dig in. And then eventually, while I was actually on the Forbes 30 under 30 trip, I broke out in shingles. And being a 20-something with shingles is very rare. And that
was
really
it like in a prominent area of your body?
It was wrapped all around the side of my torso, which is quite,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was scary, and it was painful, and it was frustrating because no one understood why a young person was experiencing something that is typically associated with someone being extremely immunocompromised. And so I started to see many different doctors and physicians, from naturopaths to endocrinologists. It took me almost a year to get a diagnosis that I had an autoimmune disease, which was self-induced because of stress. And it was really that moment that everything came into perspective for me. First of all, no job is ever worth your health. Ever. And that was a really profound moment for me. And it opened my eyes also to, why did it take so long to get a diagnosis? Why didn't these doctors understand what was happening in my body? Why do most autoimmune diseases impact women disproportionately? And why don't we understand what causes them, or really effectively how to treat them long term? And that also opened my eyes to how little I knew about my body and how little the medical establishment knew about my body. And it really set me on my way.
The whole 30 under 30 at the Forbes, the whole thing. I mean, it feels like such a mission for a lot of young women. It's so obviously sought after to become this like boss in your field, being recognized for it. Also that you come from a single mother household, which I'm sure contributed to your eagerness and want to succeed.
Yes, completely. I was plagued with perfectionism most of my life. It's something that I'm constantly still working on, but also I was incredibly self-directed and independent. If I wanted to take a ballet class in middle school, I had to go sign myself up and figure out how I would get there. My mom was incredibly supportive, but I had to do everything on my own. And I had a brother who was just naturally so smart and so brilliant, and things didn't come so naturally to me. I had to work so hard. I always worked so hard to be the top of my class. And then as I moved into my career, I felt like I just had to work even harder because I was a woman and I wasn't from the wealthiest family or background. And so I had to kind of fight harder to get the resources and support that I needed to grow and evolve.
Because obviously you look back and you're like, oh, I wish I didn't do X and Y and Z. Are those clear to you now? Like, what are those things?
Yeah. I wish I knew that I didn't allow others to define my success. That was so critical to me to learn. And I didn't learn that until much later in life. I also didn't learn that I can't compromise my health to move ahead and get things done, because at the end of the day, we only have this one body. But also at the same time, I'm really grateful that I was very self-sufficient and I was a self-starter and I pushed myself forward, because I built these amazing opportunities for myself. But I also learned throughout that journey about boundaries and, you know, where to push, where to pull back, and also just how to give myself grace. You know, I think also just being conscious of the fact that I had a different background from a lot of my peers. I felt like I was constantly looking for affirmation. You know, I was really like always looking for like outside feedback. And I realized that what others think of me is none of my business.
That's a tough lesson to learn.
It is a tough lesson to learn, but only once you learn that can you really be liberated to understand and set your own terms and really see yourself more clearly. And that was very, very powerful for me to have that awakening.
So when you had the flare up with the shingles, like how fast did you connect it to, okay, I have to make a big change in my life, change my career trajectory, change profession? Like what was your kind of next steps? Because I'm sure that there's so many women that have those wake up calls.
Yeah.
But to make these big changes, it's very scary. First of all, because you're gaslighting yourself.
Yes.
You're like, oh, I just need to become stronger. I just need to learn how to handle it. And it takes a lot of courage to be like, this doesn't serve me anymore. And I need to completely revamp.
After I had the shingles, I became extremely lethargic. Just like I said, so much was changing in me and I knew something was wrong. But it took months and months, over 9 months, to get a diagnosis that I had this autoimmune disease. And it was only once I got that diagnosis that I had the wake-up call when the doctor said, you probably did this to yourself. And my heart sank because I knew I was guilty of it. I did. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't taking care of myself. My adrenals were constantly maxed out. Cortisol was just pumping through my veins all the time. And he said, you can do 3 things. 1, you need to reduce your stress. 2, you need to go on a synthetic form of a thyroid medication. So I did that. And then 3rd, he encouraged me to give up gluten, which can have some impacts in terms of the experiences that I was feeling. From that day forward, I followed everything he said to a T. I changed my relationship with work. I changed my job. I prioritized my self-care, my family. Obviously, having an autoimmune disease like I had really impacted my fertility too. And that really opened my eyes and also racked me with guilt because it made it more challenging. My autoimmune increased my risk of miscarriage by an additional 15%. And as we know, miscarriages already, or pregnancy loss, as I prefer to say, is quite prevalent already, just baseline. So I started meditation. I adjusted the workouts I was doing. I was no longer doing SoulCycle at 5:30 a.m. And then additionally, I had to reset my relationship with my business. And I worked with a coach who really helped open up my eyes to how can I set a better boundary for myself? Where do I start and my career begins? Where is the end and the beginning? And that was really powerful. So there was a lot of just personal development work. I studied a lot of Stoicism. I am a huge fan of that philosophy, and that really grounds me in my day-to-day. And then I had an inkling that I needed to make a bigger change. I was running a large media company at the time. I was running Who, What, Where, Birdie, and My Domain.
Wow.
I was the president of the company and the executive editor-in-chief, so overseeing a very large company. I opened up the business in the UK, Australia. I oversaw a global team. It was a lot to have on my shoulders. And I'd been there for about 5 years. And I realized that while I was so passionate about what I was doing, I also need to be passionate about my own life and what happens outside the walls of my career. And so I started to think about, where do I go next? From there, I went to Urban, which owns Free People, or Urban Outfitters, Anthropology. And that was such a breath of fresh air. It was just such a different type of environment. I felt reinvigorated. All of the leadership, you could tell there were very strong boundaries and a value of family, which I didn't feel like I had that much support in terms of my ambitions to create a family at my old work. And so that really opened my eyes to how can you create a culture that also values family. Ultimately, to have a great team that's inspired, your values also need to align with just the natural humanity in people.
Yeah.
And so I went there, but I also still had an inkling that I knew I wanted to start something. I felt very, very passionate. I had this very unusual background. I had done fundraising for my previous company. I ran the company at executive level. So as I started to dig into my fertility journey and eventually became pregnant, I was very fortunate to have access to all of these different physicians and practitioners. I had a naturopath, I had my OB, I saw an acupuncturist, and everyone was kind of telling me how to piece and adjust my routine throughout my journey. I had this vision, like, what if my whole care team could get on a Zoom call and agree? Because I'm taking this because one doctor told me, I'm taking that because another doctor told me. Does this all vibe together? Is my liver going to be okay? This is crazy.
The doctors don't communicate,
no.
Right? Like for regular person that doesn't have a network, they just go to different places.
Yes, and the reality is you need to make sure all those things are working in harmony together. And so again, throughout this experience, my eyes were open to just how overly complicated and under-researched and under-supported I felt in this chapter of life. And it was around this time I'd gone through my first pregnancy, had my first baby, and I was introduced to a woman who would later become my co-founder. And she is one of the most smartest, brilliant women I know. And I am just so grateful that she is truly the yin to my yang. But we were set up on a blind date at Erewhon.
I love
very,
that.
very LA. I know we're a bit of a stereotype, but we showed up and she was also nursing her second. I was nursing my first, and we said, all right, you got 30 minutes because I got to get home to pump. And so we started meeting weekly. And what I learned is that her daughter was born with a nutrition-related cleft lip. As she started to dig in, her eyes were open to how underregulated the prenatal vitamin category is, how nutrient deficiencies can really shape and impact, obviously, birth outcomes. That combined with my experience understanding that, wow, our bodies are kind of changing throughout this whole journey. We stepped back and we wondered, if our bodies and babies are changing so much throughout all these different unique trimesters and stages, why don't our nutrient changes too? We started to wonder, when you're earlier in your pregnancy, why isn't there something that puts the entire routine together to support you in optimizing your fertility, something that already has the CoQ10 and the DHA and your core prenatal, and something that maybe changes for first trimester and doesn't have as much CoQ10, but maybe it has more B6 and ginger. And maybe as you move into your second trimester, when you're starting to experience some cramps or constipation, more magnesium, because also that's when babies and mom both need more magnesium and calcium introduced as they move into the later stages of your pregnancy. And then we sat back and we're like, what are we talking about? We're just two moms who feel overwhelmed in the vitamin aisle. What are we doing?
Yeah.
But then we realized, well, why don't we ask the doctors and experts who know best? And so we got on a Zoom with one of the leading OBGYNs here in the country. And we shared this vision of, we basically asked her to do it. We said, can you and your colleagues please create a vitamin routine that adapts based on where a woman is in her hormonal journey, so that when she's trying to conceive, it's a whole routine all put together for her, ready to go, but it changes and adapts through each trimester and into postpartum. And she looked at us and she said, that's an amazing idea. You must do it. And we were both like, wait a minute, what? And so we were quite overwhelmed with this task to set out and build this business. And this person became a really important advisor for us. She helped build our entire medical advisory panel. So we have some of the nation's top, not only OBGYNs, one of whom is our co-founder, Dr. Bayati, who is a very holistic leaning OBGYN with a very acute understanding of nutrition. So she's very special. In partnership with top reproductive endocrinologists, maternal fetal medicine doctors that are widely published. We even have a reproductive psychiatrist who influence our postpartum product, because obviously our mental health is critical during that time.
Yeah.
So it's this whole team. In addition to some alternative medicine practitioners, we have nutritionists, we have naturopaths, we even have a doula who weighs in on all of our formulations. And together, that vision of getting everyone on a Zoom came to reality during the throes of COVID. And they would get on and
another
just
gift of COVID.
I know, but it was so beautiful because they would get on these calls and really pressure test every single nutrient. Because when you look, especially in the prenatal vitamin category, there isn't a standard consistent recommendation across CDC, ACOG. They all have different recommendations in terms of formats and nutrients. A lot of it is stymied because of a lack of research and the ethics around clinicals with pregnant people.
Which I want to get more into it. But you know what? I have to say, it brings me back to my journey when I was pregnant. I was so lost, and thank God that it was in the years when the online advice wasn't as prominent.
Yeah,
because now I can only imagine if someone goes online and you're pregnant and you're trying to find direction, you get so many people saying so many different things, you end up buying a bunch of things and you don't know what you're doing. But back then it was very basic. It was like folic acid and a prenatal that was disgusting that I had to stop taking because I'm like, I literally want to vomit every time I take it.
Completely.
And there was really no one else that would answer any questions. I wasn't progressed enough to like look for alternative doctors. To me, it was just like my OBGYN was the only voice, and that's it, because I was scared, especially with my first. So to look at what you guys did with Perelel Health, and it's like you encapsulated a village in your formulas.
We really did. And it's fascinating because not only are they looking at the latest medical research on an ingredient level, but they're also considering their clinical insights. Clinical insights is, what are they seeing in their clinical work, i.e. when they're working with patients day in and day out, in their labs, in their experiences, maybe in their lack of tolerance to certain vitamins. They're seeing this, they're hearing this from real people. And we put that into our formulations. I mean, for example, we don't put biotin into our prenatal vitamins, unlike many other brands, because it can actually lead to throwing off your your labs and leading to misdiagnosis of potentially a thyroid disorder or something of the like. So it's quite amazing what we've also been able to kind of glean just from them bringing in a bit more of that kind of anecdotal feedback of what they're seeing with their patients, in addition to obviously all the medical research. And so it's been quite amazing. I mean, ultimately today, Perelel is the first and only OBGYN-founded women's vitamin brand that offers targeted nutrition for each unique stage of a woman's hormonal journey. And while we started in the prenatal vitamin category, we now have products from anyone who has started their period all the way through perimenopause with this very targeted approach.
When you got into this industry and saw how certain brands manufacture and the kind of products that they use, like what shocked you the most?
Everything. First of all, from just capitalizing our business, the best way to describe it was walking up a river. We had such a lack of buy-in that women deserved a more comprehensive product made by the doctors and experts who know best. They said, well, contract manufacturers are just pumping out prenatal vitamins. Why don't people just buy those? The motherhood category is only limited to 9 months. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm not just a mom for 9 months. I'm pretty sure I'm a mom for the rest of my life. And my body's also dynamic. My hormones are changing. You know, my goodness, what I'm going through now, I'm done having kids for now. I'm kind of on the doorstep of perimenopause, and I'm already feeling more changes. I need to support myself differently. First of all, just capitalizing the business was a huge challenge. Getting buy-in from the medical community was not a challenge. That was actually where we saw the most opportunity, and why we knew we had to do what we had to do, is because for many reasons, most doctors really do want to take care of their patients the best they can. And there's larger systemic challenges for them. Their time with patients is limited, so they don't have that opportunity to go deeper and offer that much time on education. And our product naturally did that. The health and wellness category is plagued by a lot of snake oil salesmen, a lot of people selling you false claims and your hopes and dreams and pop this pill and everything will be better. Well, the reality is it doesn't work that way. Even with Perelel, you have to commit to long-term foundational health, which is, to me, what's most important is get sleep, drink water, move your body. It's not that complicated. And then beyond that, supplement where you can. It's a good idea. It adds another layer to your foundation. And then, of course, there's all of these other kind of alternative wellness solutions that I'm also a huge fan of. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I will drink my sea moss. I love those minerals. As we started to dig in deeper, we also learned about a lot of practices that felt just wrong. We looked at each other and we said, yeah, it would be a lot easier to create a product that was 2 vitamins or 1 pill and you could pop it and go. But the reality is that's not enough. Otherwise, you're paying for very expensive urine. You need support nutrients to ensure bioavailability. So we really committed to bioavailability, which is why we have a multi-pill sachet that we provide for each targeted vitamin routine stage. Then we really learned a lot about testing. And this is really what made our heads spin. We said, if our job is to support and nurture our customers' health, why would we ever compromise that? So everything that we do has to be with integrity to ensure that we're supporting their health, even if that means forfeiting decisions on our bottom line, making our products maybe slightly more expensive because they have to subscribe to a certain standard of quality. And also from testing, what we learned, which was shocking, is there's a common practice in the vitamin and supplement category called lot skipping. And lot skipping is essentially this practice where companies can claim that they do third-party testing. However, what they can do is they can test a batch and then they'll assume the next few batches are clean. So they could skip 2, 3 to 5 batches and not test them and still claim they're third-party tested.
How can a consumer keep up? I don't understand.
Well, educate yourself. We do triple testing. We test
so
every
that's what you're looking for
batch.
To see. It's called triple testing.
Well, we have called it triple testing, but essentially ensuring that the company does not do lot skipping. You can simply ask them, send them an email. Do you lot skip? They need to be transparent and share that information, but most brands don't say it. One, because it's expensive. It's more expensive for us to lot skip and test every single batch.
Yeah.
Secondly, manufacturers don't like it because it keeps your product on their line longer and they're not making as much money. We have to test every batch. Again, we can't risk our customers' health. Why would we ever do that? And so the category is played with a lot of wonky old decisions and people that are really set out to make a lot of money because, again, we were talking about this earlier, but people do look for quick fix solutions. The reality is no vitamin, no matter how amazing or effective or the research is behind it, it's going to be a quick instant fix. It's about a long-term commitment to your holistic health.
I would be infuriated, honestly, probably walking into an industry and realizing how so much of what we being sold and told is unregulated.
Well, and the claims.
Claims, right. No one's paying attention to those.
No one's paying attention to it. And we file all of our claims with the FDA. We ensure that every single claim is substantiated by a body of research and double-blind studies.
Yeah.
Every single thing we say. And yeah, I would love to go out and say these crazy things to drive sales, but like we would never do that because it's just fundamentally wrong. And I think when we step back to who we were when we started this business, it was two moms who wanted to create a better product, to create a healthier and more supported world for women. And so why would we ever do anything contrary with that?
When you build something so beautiful and so like mission driven, it's in a way you have to operate in the same way that you operate in your personal life.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
I mean, my mission in life is to create a world with more healthy, supported women. And that's Perelel's mission too. And beyond the work that I do with this business that I hope will live far beyond me. I hope it lives far beyond my daughter. I hope it becomes a global brand that is synonymous with supporting women and helping us all understand how to take better care of ourselves. But also my own personal work. I'm very involved in women's health advocacy. You mentioned the women's health research gap. I could talk about that all day long, but it's
I
something
want
I'm
you
very
to talk
passionate
about it because I know that you started a fund.
So what we did actually through Perelel specifically is from day one, we were sitting at my co-founder's kitchen table, as you do, wondering if the world was ending because it was COVID. We were sitting there and we're like, well, if we're going to do this, we want to make sure that we're doing everything with a high level of integrity and thoughtfulness from the products, the way we show up for marketing. But also, we were always really inspired by companies like Tom's. How can you do good if you're going to participate in capitalism? Okay, like there's an interesting question. And so we felt that, wow, we have an interesting opportunity. Thinking about my co-founder's experience with her daughter, we learned that 1 in 33 babies born in the United States are born with birth defects, many of which are nutrition related. And that's just here in the United States. And as you start to peel the proverbial onion, you learn that it's really a matter of access to high quality nutrition and care. And so we built in from day one a very interesting kind of two-prong give back component to our business. One is associated with a statistic I just shared, where we, for every prenatal subscription, we donate a supply to underserved women here in the United States specifically who lack access to high quality nutrition and prenatal care. And as of last month, we have supported over 100,000 pregnancies here in the United States through our Give Back program, which many tears were shed. We just are so grateful for what we're able to do. So that's been a big driver, just knowing that we're doing good as we're moving forward. And then secondly, because we understood that with the wealth of knowledge we do have, we use it to formulate our products, of course. But there's so many gaps. There's so much we don't know about our bodies. And so how can we support closing the women's health research gap? And so we actually decided to deploy a percentage of our sales to direct grants to organizations that support research focused on menarche through menopause. And so we're currently deploying all of our cash grants to McGee Women's Research Institute out of Pittsburgh. They're doing incredible work to help us understand our bodies from PMDD, pregnancy, PCOS. I mean, all of the things that we're all Googling and TikToking, I guess, all the things we're curious about. And they're doing incredible work there. Personally, I've just become extremely involved in advocacy work because, first of all, most people, the public, generally doesn't know that we don't know a lot about women's bodies. Most of what we know today is based on research done on white men. And as we know, we are not small men. And so because of these pervasive gaps in care, women are diagnosed later for over 700 diseases. The number one killer for women is heart disease. That's more than every single type of cancer combined. That's how intense it is. So it's wild. So at any rate, I'm very involved in that. And so what I've seen kind of my role to be is, first of all, I just want to educate women on there's a reason you're probably not getting the diagnosis you want. There's a reason you're shouldering the consequences of this gap day in, day out. There's a reason why your pain is not being affirmed. It's because we don't know. We have to invest in research. And so in educating the public, my hope is that we can also therein educate our lawmakers to ensure that we are investing in women's health research and that it is an important thing to do. And it's actually possible to close the research gap in our lifetime.
Absolutely.
We can do it. It's about $12 billion. is what we need to catch up. And
I mean, we
can
stopped
do it.
producing nickels or whatever. So I feel like we have some money that we can allocate to this.
So, and the other thing is like beyond it being a humanitarian issue, obviously women live 25% more of their life in poor health. That adds up to 75 million years of life lost every year for women. But beyond it just being a humanitarian issue and quality of life issue, it's also an economic issue. For every dollar invested in women's health, you will see a $3 return in the global economy, which can definitely shift things for us. So women are able to stay in the workforce longer. They're able to be more productive later into life. So there's a lot of value in investing in women's health research.
Until we really going to have big changes that are coming, I know. How can we as women advocate for ourselves in the medical field? Because I think that's where we also have a disconnect. What can we do now to make sure that we are not neglected?
Absolutely. Well, it comes back to we have to do our own research. You have to dig in and understand. And when you are feeling a symptom or feeling disconnected from your body or something feels off, keep fighting for yourself. Find alternative paths for care. There's so many different avenues now. There's so many incredible startups that have come to market that are providing access to care at more reasonable costs. So it's ultimately about being your own advocate. Common things like PCOS, for example, it's severely undiagnosed. And most women aren't affirmed in terms of getting an accurate diagnosis, but they have to keep asking the questions and seeing different practitioners.
I mean, I see my mother, she is going through menopause, and I can't even tell you, her full-time job is seeing doctors this year.
Absolutely.
And she has no idea where to go, who to talk to. One says this, the other one says the opposite. And it's so frustrating.
It is. It's so frustrating and so demoralizing, really, because you expect there to be answers. And again, the problem is that there aren't answers yet because we haven't done in-depth clinical trial work on those life stages. I mean, last year there was finally some massive unlocks in terms of funding that would flow into midlife, later life research. But again, it kind of comes back to ensuring that we are all publicly voicing our support of advancing that research, because if that stops, we're not going to know. And we're all going to be driving around to these appointments just like your mom in 10, 20 years and racked with the same issues. And what breaks my heart is that all of eternity until now, women have been suffering in silence, especially as they go through perimenopause and menopause. You know, most women don't even know what perimenopause is. I didn't know what it was until 5 years ago. And I'm like a little ahead of the curve. Yeah. It just breaks my heart because it has such a massive impact on your life, on your psyche, on your body. And there's this opportunity now that we see where we can invest and finally close the gap, understand what's happening so that we can then take the learnings and put it into practice. Understand what therapies are going to support women that are experiencing very difficult mental health issues or weight issues. There's lots of funky symptoms that come along with perimenopause.
I'm sure. You mentioned how you learn about perimenopause recently. If you can share just what are those stages of those hormonal kind of fluctuations that we're experiencing as women, because I find that something that helped me a lot is to learn what to expect so I can get ahead of it.
Absolutely. Yes, I am very much of the same mind.
Let's start from the beginning. You have because Perelel also does vitamins for
your cycle.
Puberty.
Yes. Well, we have a product that's essentially, it's a vitamin pack that changes and syncs with each stage of your cycle. So once you start menstruating,
right,
or wherever you are in your journey, if you have a period, that runs on a more or less somewhat regular cycle of 28-ish days, could be longer, could be shorter. We have a pack that actually has vitamins that change and adapt based on what your nutrient needs are for each stage of your cycle. So as you're in your follicular stage, it changes as you move into your menstrual, and then into your luteal stage, you need different nutrients to support your body.
Which is the first and the biggest thing that I've learned when I wanted to get in tune with my body, the cycle syncing and the whole kind of information around that. So I think that's brilliant.
They are literally vitamins that sync with your cycle. And so we created that product. It's a very innovative product, a great packaging experience. I love it so much. It was very much born out of the fact that my co-founder and I would joke that horns would grow out of my head when I was PMSing. I'm like, what can we do? True. And do we have borderline PMDD? And as we started to dig in and ask our doctors, they said, well, yes, there is a wealth of knowledge to show that supplementation can help offset some of those symptoms and just ease the symptoms of your cycle that are not so pleasant. So we do have products for that phase. And then obviously for those that are looking to build a family. We have products for obviously fertility, pregnancy, postpartum.
Which again, hormones, you want to...
will fluctuate through that stage.
Right.
Yes.
And you want to support yourself through that.
Exactly. And then past postpartum, most women in their late 30s, early 40s will begin the early stages of perimenopause. And those, again, are changes in your hormones. And with those shifts and changes in your hormones, you will experience a multitude of symptoms, or maybe none. Everyone is different. I definitely recommend anyone listening, if you have a strong relationship with your mother, to have that conversation and understand her perimenopause transition, because yours will most likely be quite similar. I'm sorry.
That's so... Oh my God.
But we created a product for that as well. And what's really interesting about our Peri support pack is that our co-founder, Dr. Bayati, is actually in the throes of her own perimenopause transition. And so she was really able to take into account a lot of that personal experience and develop the product with that in mind. So menopause is one day of your life.
Wait, what?
Yeah. People think it's like this. Perimenopause is that whole transitional phase. Then you have menopause, which is one day of your life. It is the first day you haven't had a period for 12 months. But it's really hard to pinpoint. People don't typically know exactly the day. But you will have a day that your body experiences menopause. And then henceforth, you're postmenopause. And your body
So even
is...
terminology-wise, we're not getting it accurately.
It drives me nuts.
Good. That's good to know.
Yes, good to know.
So then the postmenopause has obviously its own needs and support that we need to give.
Exactly. And I think this has been a really interesting area for us to think about at Perelel. Is beyond our vitamin packs, we've developed a whole suite of products that further support these different key life stages. For example, we developed an electrolyte drink mix that has collagen and hyaluronic acid as well as electrolytes, because after the age of 20, your natural collagen stores start depleting and your ability to produce collagen starts decreasing as well. So that's really critical. We also just launched our new triple support protein, which
I'm a fan. First, shared the products and the ingredients in it because I thought it was brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Well, something that we do really well at Perelel is we take a routine and we simplify it. We make it into either one little packet experience, one scoop. We want to take all those things that we're all piecing together on our own and dose it appropriately and put it together into a single product, because we're busy. I don't have time to do a lineup of all these different things. So with our triple support protein, it has 20 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, which is really important. Most women are not getting enough fiber. Actually, you're supposed to get about 25 grams of fiber a day, and most women are getting about 16.
Wow.
So it's really important for heart health, digestive health. And then it also has creatine in it. And creatine is a very powerful supplement. Most people equate creatine with gym bros and bulking up, but actually has amazing research behind it. Creatine is one of the most researched supplements in the world.
I observed my husband taking creatine when he committed to his gym lifestyle. And I was like, oh, maybe I should start taking it too. When I asked my doctor, she's like, yeah, maybe, like not sure. And then when I asked a functional doctor, he said, for sure, take it. Because it's not just muscles, it's like your brain. There's so many great benefits from it. And that's when I started looking into it, because it's not so common like to hear information about it.
Women's natural stores of creatine actually start to reduce significantly after the age of 30. And it's a really important nutrient, not only for maintaining muscle mass, which is super important, especially as you navigate into perimenopause and postmenopause, but it also has incredible cognitive benefits. One of my favorite studies is actually a study that was done on sleep-deprived individuals, and they found that a single high dose of creatine can improve their processing and memory function within 3 hours of taking the dose. It's amazing. I've been taking creatine every day since August. I also introduced a whole new workout routine to my life, and I've never felt stronger, sharper, clearer than I ever have before. To me, the common denominator is the creatine. It's been incredible.
Okay, creatine check. We need to make fiber sexy again, check.
Yes.
Talk to me about your adjusting your workout routine, because you mentioned it a few times that even when you had your kind of wake-up call, you had to change the way you moved. Then, is that something you also pay attention to as you move through the different phases?
I think so. I don't think anything is ever set in stone for our bodies. They're so dynamic. Just as our hormones are changing and shape-shifting throughout our lives, I think we also have to be very adaptable in the way that we care for ourselves. When I got my autoimmune diagnosis, I started to do a lot of yoga and Pilates, and that really carried me through my pregnancy and felt really good in my body. But now that I'm past that chapter, I'm focused on lifting weights and strength training and building my foundation, because one of the biggest threats to women as they navigate into older age is scarpopenia. And that is essentially the loss of muscle mass. And older ladies who might be very frail, it's a huge threat to your
breaking,
osteoporosis. Yeah. So it's really, really important to have that good foundation of muscle strength. And so I've been focusing on that. I'll go to the gym. I'm out on the gym floor with all the bros taking my creatine, but I love it. It's been really good. And actually, this is where ChatGPT comes in handy. Sometimes I'll say, like, what's a shoulder friendly workout for the gym floor? It's great. It's so awesome.
It covered me in many different areas in my life. You mentioned how there's so many interesting studies about creatine, as you guys at Perelel so ahead of the game when it comes to research and everything that can benefit women. Is there any other ingredients or specific how would you say, it's not a supplement, but it's like specific
like
nutrients that we need to kind of talk more about?
First, iron. Iron is critical. I think iron gets a bad rap because most people equate it with constipation or hurts their tummy. And well, in fact, that can be very true. It's about taking an iron that is high quality and has a blend. So we have iron in some of our products. Some we do not, because most people should get it through their diet. That's the ideal format. But what we noticed is that, or what we learned is that about 80% of women by the time they hit their third trimester are anemic. And so we developed kind of this add-on product called Iron Ease, which has iron, vitamin C. It's very easy on the tummy. And then another nutrient is actually magnesium.
Oh, yeah.
Many women are deficient in magnesium, and that can disrupt everything, you know, again, from your mood to your sleep habits, your stress levels. So we created a proprietary magnesium tri-blend called Sleep Support, and I take a scoop many nights a week. I actually see proof is in the pudding because my Oura ring will always tell me that I had such a great sleep score. I get 90s when I take our sleep support.
When you get the data. I
love the data. I'm very data driven, so that's always really exciting. So we have that product as well that has been just really warmly received and also solves for many people that are experiencing that challenge.
I don't know any dinner party with women over 30 that magnesium hasn't been mentioned in this year. So I'm happy that that's been out and circling around. Also, don't you love when women get together and the next day you're just like, hey, send me this powder, send me this, send me a link to this.
Totally.
I love it. I always leave with like so much information, and that's why I was so happy for you to come and sit with me, because I'm like, I feel like this would be that kind of get together where the girls are taking notes.
Okay, well, one note I have to share because I don't want to gatekeep.
Yes.
Weighted vest. So, hear me out for a second. There's been, again, so much research to show that strength training and kind of more high impact work on a female body to support bone density is critical, especially now if you're in your mid 30s. Like, start doing the work now because this is your foundation for later. So I've started wearing a weighted vest when I do just like things around the house or I go on a walk around the street, and our doctors are all huge fans of it. So get yourself a weighted vest. I wish I invented this, but it's like $20 on Amazon.
Okay, I'm so getting that. That's brilliant. And just doing things around the house. You don't have to like wear it just to the gym.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be so complicated. I would not wear it to the gym. It might make things a little too tricky.
You don't want to scare the gym bros.
Exactly, yeah.
How often do you do blood work? I'm so curious.
About once a year.
Once a year?
Yeah, about once a year. I was doing it every 3 to 6 months because of my thyroid, but interestingly enough, I actually self-healed. I'm in remission.
I can't even tell you how many of my friends had thyroid issues throughout pregnancy.
Yeah, a lot of people do. It's very, very common.
Did you get to the bottom of like why it inflicts so many, like on so many women?
Not that, but what was interesting and what also just even deepened my connection to my advocacy work was that I did all of the things. I had been living gluten-free, taking my Synthroid every day, reducing my stress, like doing all of the things. And my doctor said lifestyle changes can ultimately lead you into remission. But then he said, but also pregnancy completely resets your entire hormone system. Actually, the act of going through pregnancy and having a baby and moving into motherhood is equivalent to the massive shifts that happen in adolescence. It's actually known as matrescence. It's such a massive shift. It's literally your whole hormone system is reset. And so he said, or it could be just having babies might have reset your system. And again, We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. So for now, I'm no longer taking the medication, but I am living in
amazing.
harmony with my new, well, I don't eat gluten, I manage my stress and all of the above. But
you
isn't that
see, even
interesting?
that information, as women, knowing that we are literally like our whole bodies
Yes.
change completely, like the same process we go through adolescence, I think will bring so much more awareness and compassion to the changes that are coming. Because I don't know about you, but after my first, I was like, okay, like I'm bouncing back to myself.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't.
No.
And I'm like, what's wrong with me?
I became a new person.
Right.
I love who I became. But in addition to your hormones changing, it's also the largest psychological change.
Oh my God.
It's the magnitude is almost more than anyone can comprehend. Do you remember looking at yourself in the mirror the first time after you had your first child? And
yeah, of course
wondering,
I remember.
Who,
like, who are
is
you?
this? You're a mom? Like, what? Like, how is this possible?
It honestly still happens to me from time to time. I look around and like my eldest is 11 and he's as tall as me. And I'm like, what? Who does this belong to?
Yeah, I feel too young, but I
need to understand that psychological phenomenon because I so clearly remember my mother at 36 and I don't know what happens at 36, but I've asked a lot of other women and 36 was a very interesting year for them, like that 36, 37.
How so?
Something shifted. It was just kind of like something descended. I'm 34. I'm going to be 35 soon. And listen, I'm not saying that it's exactly on 36 something will happen, but
yeah, I don't disagree. I'm 37. So I actually think I just went through this over the past year.
Okay.
To me, it was relaxing into myself.
Right. It's just, it's kind of like all of a sudden you're fitting into your,
I'm fitting into my new role, my life. I'm accepting that. Again, two things can be true. I can be a mom, but I can still be me. And I've been able to kind of coalesce those worlds more effectively. It's really beautiful. It really is. And it kind of makes me think like, okay, yeah, 40, but I don't know, bring it on. I'm probably going to like love and feel better in myself by that point too. I just think as you start to age, you start to have this acceptance and you start to understand that you can have these different parts of yourself all within one.
Yeah,
and
it's
quite
constantly
beautiful.
changing. I read, it's not scientifically researched, but I read somewhere that women have these transitional phases every 7 to 10 years, like these big shifts.
Yes.
So we can never get too comfortable.
No, we can't.
The minute you do.
But you actually do. There is science behind it because your hormones, what is happening in your hormones as you're in your mid-40s is creating a new shift that's going to impact your psychology as well.
See?
I mean, think about it. Your hormones manage everything in your body. They're the conductors. They're critical. So just even the way you think, the way you feel, the way you look. And so that's a very real thing.
A woman's body, of course, looking at the hormones, supporting the hormones, but it's such a holistic approach.
It is.
And I think that's what we need to speak more on. And I love that you guys do it with your mission and your message.
Thank you.
And taking so much action towards it.
Yeah. I mean, our bodies are complex and they require complex solutions, but the actual act of taking care of ourselves just shouldn't be so hard.
I know.
And how can we make that easier? Yeah.
Well, you're making it easier by bottling a village.
Thank you.
Practical tips for thriving because we are moving away from the survival lifestyle.
Yes.
And for someone like yourself who have the autoimmune condition, like even managing that, what are some things? I know you mentioned meditation. I know you mentioned boundaries. Any other things that really helped you to set yourself?
Well, it's hard for me to say, and I have a very unique experience because I'm also a founder of a business and I founded my business in the throes of building a family. And so when I set out to create this business, I knew that I would have to forfeit things in my personal life for the sake of getting things done for my business. And I agreed to that. I knew I'm going to spend less time with my extended family. I'm not going to see my friends as much. And that was a real challenge for those first 4 years, really. I had to go all in. And what's been really exciting for me is this past year, I've decided to reclaim what brought me joy. And that was ensuring that every week I had time with my girlfriends, whether it was a workout or just gabbing on the phone or doing dinner, making sure we have something on the calendar every week, because that personal time with my my girls is so important to me. Keeps my feet on the ground. I have friends that have been my best friends since I was in elementary school that are still my ride or dies. And so just nurturing those relationships has been so, so important for me.
Spending time with friends has been surprisingly for me a huge lesson as well. I think we look for so many kind of actionable tips and products and changes, but that one was shifted the way I feel about myself in life so much.
No face mask, no manicure is as good as time with friends.
Yeah.
And again, just going back to how am I going to define success for me? It's the quality of my relationships. And so that's been a big driver for me in just creating more harmony in my life, more abundance, more joy. And just really committing to that. It's almost like I got to make sure I cross it off the list, not in a way that puts the pressure on and makes it a thing to do, but holding myself accountable, because it is really easy to slip into work. Yeah. It is really easy to slip into even just my own home life. And that's really important. Also, just having more one-on-one time with my kids. You know, I sometimes feel guilty because I wanted to start this business and we did, but it also was at the cost of some really important time with my children. And I think I've done a fair job, like really keeping them. They are my number one priority. They're everything in my life. And so is my partner as well. But just pouring even more of myself and my time into that space with them and making sure I'm wholly present. And that's also sparked a new joy for reading. I've been a voracious reader my whole life, and I lost a lot of that in the past 4 years starting a business. And so that was another thing that I wanted to reclaim in terms of like what brings me joy and also helps me deepen relationships with people in my life is reading. So I've just taken up reading again, which has been really wonderful. I read a really wonderful book recently that I think you and maybe your listeners might like. It's called How to Know a Person by David Brooks.
I have it right here. I love it.
It was so wonderful.
I love it.
Did you love it? Yeah.
I love it. And I read it actually when I started the podcast because I've realized that even though I thought I was a really good communicator and listener, when you are sitting down to speak to somebody for an hour or whatever, it was very humbling to learn that I have no idea what I was doing. So
same.
even just like being able to pay attention to how you listen and what is active listening even means.
Yes.
So it was brilliant. I love the book.
It's such a good book. Everyone should read it, especially whether you're in a relationship or have children or just someone out in the world developing relationships in your career. It was a phenomenal book and so well written. So
any other book, I love reading. That's my love language.
Me too.
Any other book, even throughout your life, that really shifted the way you looked at the world?
This one completely changed my worldview. It was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's a heavy hitter. It's a heady read, but it changed my life. Yeah. It changed my life. There was one line in that book that really opened my eyes to how I had been conditioned to measure my happiness on external factors. And I'd always been very stressed and anxious in my life. And there was a line, I'll maybe butcher it, but it was something to the effect of, we're led to believe that there is a moment in the future that is far more important than the moment that we're paying attention to now.
Wow.
And there isn't, because all you have is now.
Yeah.
And the recipe for unhappiness is wanting what you don't have. And it's so simple and yet so powerful. And truly living in my life, being present, has been such a wonderful experience and something that I want everyone to experience, because you realize how many of us are living in the future that hasn't even happened.
Yeah.
Suffering twice. So there's this idea that my husband has shared with me, this idea of suffering twice. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, because it's like the worry, the anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Of what you are.
For example, when I was pregnant with my second.
Yeah.
I had a bit more of like a traumatic birth with my first, and I was really scared to give birth again. Like I got pregnant and I was like, oh my God, this is great. I'm so nervous for the birth. And I kept thinking about it. And my husband would say, don't think about it. You don't know what's going to happen. You're suffering now thinking about it just as much as you might suffer if it happens again. So just suffer once. And I think about that often, whether it be a challenging conversation I have to have with someone at my company, or having to do something that I don't love to do and stressing and making a big thing of it. And so this idea of suffering once was really a byproduct of all the reading that I had done by Eckhart Tolle. So That book was amazing.
I'm trying now to find this balance between intellectualizing, because I love sitting and like unpacking and looking at the situation from every direction. Sometimes I feel like that steals the opportunity for pleasure.
I don't do that. I really don't. I know it's wild.
You're giving me, you should do less of that, you know?
Well, I mean, the reality is like, again, our emotions and thoughts kind of control the way that we're responding to the world. And I realized, going back to almost that notion of suffering twice, like, why would I rehash or analyze this? Because what's done is done. The only thing I can influence is right here and what might happen next. And so, for example, a philosophy that really guides my day to day is just do the next right thing. That's all I can do. As an formerly very anxious person who wanted to future-proof everything in my life, from when I had babies to like career advancements, all of the different things, I realized that no, all I can actually do is right here and now, and making that next right decision that will ultimately domino into the next thing. And so for me, rumination, essentially kind of analyzing what's happened and what's done, like, is never so productive to me. So sometimes I have a challenge with that. I've seen lots of therapists throughout my life, all the different things, but sometimes I'm like, I don't know how productive that is, because I'm here now.
Yes.
So like, let's figure out how we optimize and adjust this moment now, this person that I am here today, to react, because the only thing I can control in my life is how I react to things. And to me, that's next right action movement.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're leaving me with a lot of like, I'm not gonna ruminate, but I'm going to
reflect.
Thank you.
Reflect.
I want to sit and talk to you for another 3 hours, but I also know that you need to get on a plane. Yes. You're gonna go to today's show tomorrow, which is so exciting.
Thank you. We're so excited.
This was so fun.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me share my story, and just huge fan of yours. Thank you.
Absolutely love it. I'm a huge fan of yours. And please let us know. I know that we talked a lot about Perelel Health and the amazing things that you guys are doing, but let our listeners know where they can find you guys.
Of course, you can find us at Perelel Health. That's Perelel health.com, or same place on Instagram. And it's Alex Taylor on Instagram. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't miss my newest episode right here. And if you're listening to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, please go and leave a review with your biggest takeaway. I love reading your thoughts. They inspire me. So if you have any suggestions for guests or topics, you can leave them in the comment section. And always remember, you are not alone.